Hi, Blake. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure to see you again.
Good to see you again. Yes.
Been, I think, to the hour, exactly a week since we last spoke.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
I'm very excited to pick up where we left off last time because we did speak a lot about Disney, Walter
Yes.
Disney,
hmm
about some very interesting people that you met in the vicinity of Studio Disney,
hmm
and about your parents, your family. This time, I would really like to focus a bit more about how you got started in the industry, because from what we've talked before, in just little bits and pieces, I think there are some very interesting stories to hear. At the same time, I still have some questions about Disney, which I would still love to get answered this time.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah, please.
Nice. Yeah. To basically pick up from last time, you mentioned that you and your family, with your dad, your mom, your brother, that you would quite often actually go to the Golden Oak Ranch from Disney.
Yes, correct.
This,
Yeah.
how did this
hmm
come about?
Well, because what happened was at that time, the Golden Oak Ranch, it was and is still owned by Disney, and they would use it as locations for shooting movies. So a lot of TV shows that you see sometimes, whether you have exterior scenes, are actually shot at the Golden Oak Ranch. But they also have a ranch house there. And this ranch house is set up so that different executives and people at that time who were at the studio could have access to it on the weekends. So, for example, when I was very young, after the production of Mary Poppins, my father went. We had a weekend where we stayed at the Golden Oak Ranch, and also Julie Andrews was there, and also the actor Christopher Plummer, who she starred with in The Sound of Music, came over as well. And so it was, and I remember a bit of it a little young because I was, I think I was about 5 or 6 years old at the time. Yes. But it was a wonderful place, and very frequently we would go over there and spend the weekend at the ranch. And it was a nice place because, it was well looked after. If you wanted to do horseback riding, they had horses there. They had everything you want. They even had a little creeks there. You had canoes. You could go canoeing there and all this. And so it was quite nice.
A real proper ranch with horses and canoeing,
Yeah.
fishing as well.
There probably was fishing. I didn't do any fishing there, but I think you could possibly do it as well. And what was interesting about the ranch is there's a reason why it was called the Golden Oak Ranch, because it was one of the first areas where gold was discovered in the area.
So did you do some late gold digging there?
Oh no, no. I didn't actually know about that until years later. Yeah.
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 What else was there to do on the ranch? I mean, I think it's pretty cool that it was actually a ranch with animals, but
Yeah, I mean, you could, sort of go around different, there was lots of facades from sets and things like that
Mhm.
there. And what was interesting was my brother found when he was there, apparently they had one of the models for the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Mhm.
Apparently, for some reason, they had the model was taken out to the ranch, and then afterwards they just smashed it up into pieces. And he actually ended up with one of the portholes, and it was all made out of wood, that model.
So we're talking about the full scale model for shooting in it, or like a miniature model?
That was a miniature model, so it was it was probably when it was in its entirety, it was something in the range of maybe 3 meters long or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know
And
what?
then they smashed it up. And so he ended up with just a little porthole where one of the glass eyes in the front of the submarine were. Yeah.
Do you know why they had to smash it up?
I have no idea. I don't know why they smashed it up, but apparently for some reason they did. But there were many models that were created for the
Mhm.
movie. One of them was used when they shot the end of the movie where you see the Nautilus sinking at the end. That was actually shot in Malibu.
Hmm.
And I think when it went down, then it didn't come up, and that was it. Yeah,
Not,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I've quite often heard that movie props are getting destroyed after shooting, but I never really fully understood why.
This is one of them. If, for example, when they made 2001: Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick wanted all props destroyed that had anything to do with the film because he didn't want any remakes done.
Oh, that's interesting because I've very often heard stories of actors sneaking some movie props off the set because they say, well, they're going to destroy it anyways, and so that way I get to keep, I don't know, Lord of the
Well,
Rings.
exactly. There are some little bits and pieces that have sort of made its way out. That
Mhm.
somebody found one of the eyes from the HAL 9000,
Oh,
and then there was somebody actually found the remnants of the space station from 2001 that was smashed up and left in a field.
well, I mean, you've got to get rid of it somewhere, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, like somebody said, he wasn't enterprising. He didn't take it away. He left it there because the thing was enormous. Yeah, it was a big model. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Did you ever? I mean, last time you spoke about that you did spend some quite some time at movie sets because you had access to different studio spaces. Did you ever manage to sneak something off set?
No, not really. No. Yeah.
Oh,
No.
always a
Yeah.
good boy then.
Yeah, always a good boy. But what was interesting with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was because it was one of the first movies that was shot in the widescreen format of CinemaScope.
Hmm.
And CinemaScope was trademarked to 20th Century Fox. So what they did is when Disney made the film, they were given one lens. So what happened was when they went to shoot what they call the second unit, which is the stuff that was shot in the Bahamas and things like that, they took the lens with them there, which meant that they had no optics at the studio when they were going to shoot the model work. And the fellow who was their special effects person there, who was extremely enterprising, he created a version of the Nautilus that was all sort of squished up. So it
So
would look like if it was so basically when you looked at it through a CinemaScope lens, it looked the correct proportions. So much so he even made the rivets oval things inside. So everything was anamorphically squeezed. And you notice it in certain shots of the movie because you'll see the Nautilus going by and it looks correct. But if you look at the coral is all stretched out. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
it's incredible what length people had to go through because I know today you would just say fix it in post. I mean, you wouldn't have the problem of only having the one lens, and at the same time, you would somehow do it in a computer anyways. But to actually build a anamorphically squeezed whole ship,
Yeah,
it's
exactly. Yeah. And for example, this gentleman also did the submarines for a movie called Fantastic Voyage.
Mhm.
And the story with this was he had to make the submarine, which was called the Proteus, and he made different sizes of them when they were shrinking it down to be injected into the body. And they
Yeah.
made this little version of the submarine. And apparently it was on a window ledge while they were getting the shot set up, and a crow came back and picked it up and flew off with it.
Oh, it's really cool to hear stories like
Yeah.
that. Apart from the Golden Oak Ranch,
Yeah.
um, do you any to go back into the whole Disney thing because it's such a fascinating thing to talk about, Walter Disney. Um, did you ever spend some private time? Because I know your dad was the personal what's it called? Today it's PR, and back then
Hmm.
it was called the
Yeah, he was the personal publicist for Walt
office.
Disney. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, for example, growing up during that way, I had the ability that I would sometimes come to work with my father. And if I wanted to learn about different departments, I could just go there, and sit with the guys and then observe what they were doing and then learn this way. And that's how I picked up everything, things about film and sound mixing and even photographic lab work. They had a color lab, a black and white still lab. They had all sorts of departments there, so I could do this. And very often I would sit with the projectionists in the screening rooms. And then that's how I learned about film and how to splice film and how to care for it and these types of things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is very because today it is very, very common. I mean, if you look at 2024, for example, right now, people usually run to universities to learn any kind of thing. When 20 years ago, especially in Germany, it was very common to go through some kind of apprenticeship, internship, something like that. But that really wasn't a thing when you started out in the industry, was it?
Really not. I mean, there were cinema courses at USC and UCLA, but they were very basic things. There was just sort of, they would lock you in a room and you'd make a movie, and that was it, you know. And that's how George Lucas got started and things like that. But what would happen is that I just sort of grew up in the whole thing. And since I was, you know, basically when you are immersed in the whole thing and you're doing this from you know, from 7 years old upwards and things like that,
Mhm.
you know, everything just becomes, you know, common knowledge then. Yeah. Yeah.
How did the skills that you learned during that time, how do they translate to nowadays? Did things change a lot?
Not really, not all that much. To give you an idea, when I first got into the video industry, I got in as a tape operator when they were doing 1-inch videotapes for the cable stations like Showtime, the movie channel, and HBO, and all these types of things. And what happened was somebody said to me, "Oh, you have film experience." And then they first had me working on what we call a film chain, which was a very early type of a telecine, which is basically a film projector pointed at a TV camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said to me, "Oh, well, somebody is leaving. We'd like you to learn how to be a telecine colorist." And I said, "Perfect. Okay. So you'll be working in the evening. We'll have a guy sitting next to you. He's going to show you the ropes." And they put a film on next to me and said, here's this film for you to do. You have a week to learn. So I go through and I color corrected the whole thing. And the fellow next to me really said very little and just sort of gave me the basics. And then afterwards, they looked at it at the end of 5 days and they said, "Oh, that's great. Okay. Here's the next movie." And then it just kept going on and on and on and on. And then afterwards, after a while, then I had a offer to go to work for another company that was doing predominantly television shows. And it was a company that was doing a TV series called Hill Street Blues. And they wanted me to come over and color grade the series. And then I went there for an interview and everything was great. But I don't know, I just didn't like the situation there. I wasn't happy with it. So I opted not to go to work there. Instead, I went to work for another company that was doing another TV series, which was called Dallas. And then we were doing Dallas, Falcon Crest, Knots Landing. And I worked there for a while and I enjoyed that much more. It was a much more of an interesting place. That company used to be next door to Universal Studios. And then what happened was that the company I worked for at first said to me, "Blake, would you like to come back? And we'll put you on the day shift." And so what you can do is when you're working on the day shift, you're doing not the classic movies or the B titles or anything like that. You're doing the A title films. So I said, "Sure, okay." So then I came back and then I was doing the A title movies. And then at first I was put in a very early shift in the mornings, but I was doing things like, Revenge of the Pink Panther and stuff like this. And then afterwards, they said, okay, we want to put you on a more normal shift during the day because now you're a senior guy. And so then during the normal shift, then I was doing stuff like we had to do a film called Brainstorm, which was directed by Douglas Trumbull, and we did 2001: Space Odyssey, and then we did Poltergeist, and we did another picture called Forbidden Planet, and a lot of these pictures back to back, basically. Yeah. Mhm.
There's a lot of things that I really want to get into. So let me just circle back a little bit and try to recap. So how old were you when you first started using this cinema machine, when you first were shown the ropes?
I was about 23, 24 years old. Yeah. Mhm.
By the
Yeah.
time you came back to the first place where you started doing the A titles, when you were considered a senior colorist, what age were you then
I was
approximately?
about 26, 27. Yeah. Mhm.
So that's basically what everybody always talks about. You go someplace, you learn the ropes, the beginnings, then you venture out a little bit, you get experience, and ideally you come back more experience with a bit more facet to your skill set, and that's
Yeah.
basically what
Mhm.
you did.
Yeah. And basically what happens is that when you're working in the day shift, you're working more with the directors of the films
Hmm.
and also or the editors or some other creatives, for example. And it's quite interesting because the fact that I found that certain directors you really sort of, you know, get along super well with. And then they realize we only want to work with this guy. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe that creative people can sometimes be a little bit specific to work with. I think when they
Mm.
take a liking to you, they really take a liking. And if just the chemistry is off a bit, I don't think many people can then really get those creative juices flowing.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, for example, like we were doing a film called Bring on the Night. This is a picture that was called about Sting and the Police in
Mhm.
concert, and I was color grading it for the director, who was Michael Apted, who also did Gorillas in the Mist, and he did one of the James Bond movies as well.
Mhm.
And Michael was a super wonderful guy and very quiet, very, but he knew exactly what he wanted. So what he would do is he would not say anything, but you could kind of read into him what was going on. And we were in the room on the first day, and we had a whole room full of people, and everybody was sort of, as we say, putting their 2 cents worth in.
Mhm.
And I could tell that Michael was getting a little bit, agitated by this. He really didn't like this. And so the next day when I came in, the room was empty. And all of a sudden, it was just Michael was there. And I said, "What happened to the other guys?" And he says, "I got rid of them. It's just you and me."
Gorillas in the Mist was a very scary movie. I was very young when I saw that the first time.
But he was a super great director. He was really good, really knew what he wanted on things. And so it was, and it's rare that you find a director who, could be so, who could really trust you and everything like that. And then you try to develop that friendship between people and the working relationship rather. And it was nice because after a while, I could see he was like falling asleep in the room, and because it can get point, you're in a nice dark room, it's very relaxing, there's not much sound going on. And
Mm.
so he just, I saw him writing something on the paper, and he said, "Blake, here's my phone number." He said, "Give me a call when you're ready and I'll come in and have a look."
It's very rare to find somebody in a position like a director who also has the ability to get the best out of
Mm,
especially I think creative people, because you do need to have people somehow venture out a little bit and try things out. You need to trust them and give them a
yeah.
bit of space to work, and then
Mm,
see those moments where you need to give them some sort of guidance, but
yeah.
not restrict them. I think that is something very special about people in the creative industry who can
Mm.
actually do that and read the room and the people like that.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it's the directors, also sometimes it's the people in the studios as well. For example, one time, um, they asked me, they said, "Can you come in on a weekend to do a special grading of a title?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, no problem." And the title was it was a Hitchcock movie, North by Northwest.
Hmm.
And I came in and they said, "We have to do it, but we have to get it done over the weekend. Can you do it for us?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So I came in on the weekend, I graded the whole picture. And then Monday morning, when I was there, the phone rang in my room and it was Jerry from the studio from MGM. And I said, "What can I do for you?" And he says, "I just looked at North by Northwest." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "How come it looks so good?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, last time we did it with you guys, we had a bill for $98,000 to go through and grade it." He said, "And you did it in a weekend and it looks better." And I said, "Well, I mean, I don't know what to say, Jerry." I said, "It's one actor in a picture. He's got a gray suit on. Keep the suit gray through the whole picture and do it that way. And it just fits." Yeah.
From your experience, because you said you've worked for both now television
Yeah.
releases and also for cinema pictures, is there, besides the length, obviously, of the installments, is there any big difference when you start grading, when you know this one's is going on to TV, but this one is going towards the cinema? Is there a difference?
Not really. Different TV series are handled different ways. For example, when Dallas was initially color graded, they would only color grade the main titles and the end titles, and the body of the show was a one light transfer from a low contrast 35 millimeter copy. But a lot of shows nowadays, especially once they have gone to what they called electronic post production, whereby the original rushes are scanned, they do the edit, and then it's not graded at all. So then you have to literally grade the entire show, shot scene by scene, all the way through, because there's no color correction on there at all from that point. It's just the basic that happens during the scanning process. And so things changed a bit. I found, though, that as for how particular things were during the grading process, it didn't change so much between features and TV shows. Where it gets more selective is when you're doing TV commercials. And I've done TV commercials. And when you're doing TV commercials, you'll find, oh, gee, this client has booked 5 hours and he's got one 30-second commercial to grade. And you think, oh, he couldn't take 5 hours. No, there's no way. Yeah. Yeah. He took 5 hours to take it. It's like, whoa, wow. Did he take 5 hours? Yeah.
It's like the main differences in your experience more to differences in production and how to go at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, for example, I tend to prefer working in feature films, probably first, and then secondly, TV shows, and then thirdly would be commercials. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because what I thought is, coming from a standpoint of music, because like I told you last time, I studied music and I spend a lot of my time with doing music. When you're mixing a song, you're very specifically mixing and mastering it for whatever situation you're going to listen to the song. If you're on a big stereo system, you would mix it differently than if you knew somebody was listening to it on very small headphones in a train, or for the radio, which usually is very loud because it's loud also in the car. So I was thinking, is there a difference between a screen for television and a screen in the cinema? Or is that really you don't need to apply different values for whites and grays and these kinds of things?
Not really. No, no. I mean, it basically has to look good. Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of the premise of the whole thing, is it not?
Yeah.
You talked a bit about some of the directors without putting any specific person to a bad spot. Is there somebody you could pick out that you specifically liked working with the most, or maybe a lot?
Um, I would say Michael Apted. He was a really wonderful guy to work with. I really enjoyed um, working with him. And I mean, even for example, when we had the first screening of Bring on the Night at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood, and they were running the 70 millimeter print, and we were waiting to get in line, and he was with us in line basically to go and get into the theater. Yeah.
Did you get to meet any other, let's say, what today we would call famous personnel, any actors, actresses besides the directors that you would recall as being remarkable in any way?
Okay, yeah. For example, I think I mentioned in our last episode the evening that we spent with Hitchcock and John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith, and then also there was a gentleman who I kind of refer to. He's sort of like a second father to me because he's the kind of fellow who got me started in the industry. He was the head of post production for the Samuel Goldwyn Company, and he was very good friends with a lot of different actors and actresses. And one evening, I called his house, and this woman answered the phone. And I thought to myself, no, this must be a wrong number. I said, oh, excuse me, I have a wrong number. And she said, no, you don't. And she said, is this Blake? And I said, yes. She said, oh, this is Betty Davis. And she said, I know your father very well. Here, I'll get Tom and I'll put him on the line. So it was Betty Davis, the actress. And then another time I was at his place and we had dinner with Olivia de Havilland. She came in. And these are, really super, from that era. And, Olivia de Havilland was actually in Gone with the Wind, and Betty Davis made countless films with, people like Errol Flynn and all these, people. And so, but then another time was we would have sometimes a meetings before a screening or sometimes after, where they would have, my father would arrange for like a little dinner or a cocktail party or something like that. And there I met Christopher Lee and his wife there. And he was a super nice guy, very pleasant, and so it was. And I met, quite a few actors and things like that. And they're just like regular people and things, and very often some of them would come by our house. And it's like we knew very well actor Rock Hudson too. He was a super, super nice guy. And he one time we were going to show a film and our projector broke down. He actually got in the car and drove back to his house and picked up his projector and brought it back.
So would you say that times back then were different to today? Do you have any connection to today's Hollywood, today's leading actors, people, and that can you take a comparison there?
I don't have too much connection with today's actors or actresses. No, I don't. Some of them I have, I know of them, and they know of me and things like that. But, not like the camaraderie that we had during those times. Yeah.
It really was the golden age for cinema. I think
Yeah.
we always circle back to Tarantino movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I've seen it a couple of times, and not for the spectacle, not for any action stuff, but just for the feeling of watching it. And that's, I think, what Quentin Tarantino also talked about, what he envisioned for the movie, to just capture the zeitgeist of the era. Do you think he properly depicted LA in that time?
Yes, he did. Absolutely. I give him 4 stars on that, basically, because the way he captured places like the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood, and when the Sharon Tate Lookalike is in Westwood, and she wants to see herself at the theater, and she actually goes in. I think she goes into the Bruin to go and look at herself in that movie, and it was interesting to see that, and it was funny because when I was a kid, I would go always past the Cinerama Dome. And I thought this is kind of a neat place. I want to see what's inside. And so my dad took me inside and we went in, and they were running Krakatoa East of Java at the time. And by coincidence, in the movie of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, what are they running there? Krakatoa East of Java.
Oh, that's so cool that he really
Yeah.
paid homage to those very small details to
Oh
be
yeah.
really.
No, he did a really super excellent job of that. And I would say it's the detail and everything and how he set everything up. Because, for example, at that time, when the Sharon Tate sort of lookalike actress was in
Margot
Westwood,
Robbie.
yeah, it was very much like how you would imagine Westwood was at that time. Westwood was sort of this sort of closed area that you would go in there, and they had a theater on each side of the street and everything like that. Which is kind of sad to see now that the Village Theater is closed. And the Bruin Theater across the street is closed as well, and they don't know what they're going to do with that. Yeah, I heard the Village is going to be rebuilt. Yeah, and they're going to make it into a multi-screen theater or something like that. Yeah.
Did any of those actors, actresses, directors, any of them ever take you to the Oscars, the Emmys, anything like that?
I have actually been several times to the Oscars and several times to the Emmy Awards because I've been a member of the Academy of TV Arts and Sciences. And so because of that, I was on the voting panel for the Emmys. And so I had went in and then went to the award ceremony afterwards and went to the dinner and all that. Actually sat with the people from Saturday Night Live were there at the table with me at the dinner table.
Huh?
Yeah. But
So,
for example, for the Oscars, my father used to be he was on the board of governors for the Academy. And so what happened was I told him, I said, well, I want to go to the Oscars. And he said, no problem. Yeah. He says, here's this number. You call this lady, tell her what you want. And I called her up and she said, yeah, sure. No problem. You're Tom's son. Okay, fine. Boom. And I went down to the Academy office, and then you get the tickets, and then you get this sort of big envelope with the stuff to put on the limo, and you have the VIP thing for the limo, and all this stuff you have to stick on it, and so it was funny because first time I went there, I took my date to a very nice restaurant in Hollywood afterwards, and when I came out, the police were there, and they were talking to the driver because the chauffeur was there, and the police just wanted to know who was having dinner inside. Yeah,
just wanted to know because you were there with a limousine.
yeah, exactly. They saw the limo. Yeah.
But for me to understand properly, you you gave basically instructions to well, I want a steak dinner, red wine, and then you get like an envelope with a VIP badge, so you could go into the Oscars or could be driven in front of, or how did it work?
No. The way it works is you have first, after you say, okay, I want to get the tickets, you have to go to the Academy office in Beverly Hills, and you have to at the Academy office, you then buy the tickets, entry tickets, and all of the stuff to stick on the car so that they know that it's, to clear it for, you drive up to the red carpet when you're walking in and these types of things. And so what happens is then after dinner, you want to, of course, take your date to a nice dinner. So then what I did is I made arrangements for a dinner in Hollywood. And when you do this, you just tell the driver where you want to go, and the driver takes you there and then waits for you to finish your dinner. And then, of course, the police then ask, they wonder to know what celebrity is having their dinner, and then they're very disappointed to find out it's you. Yeah. Now with the Emmys, it's different because with the Emmys you have a dinner following the ceremony, and at the time the Emmys were done at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, and
Mhm.
so what would happen is the Emmys would they had a arena next to it that was sort of the dinner area. So you would walk over there, and then they would serve you dinner, and then they had big tables where people would sit at. Like I said, I was there with Lorne Michaels and a bunch of the other guys from Saturday Night Live, where it happened to be there at my table, and it was really good food. Actually, it was very nice.
Yeah, okay. So this instantly spawns two more questions for me. You said that you, for the Emmys, I believe, you
Yeah.
were actually on the panel and you were actually grading rating the movies, right?
Yeah, basically what it was is that in that year, I was on the voting panel for miniseries, for best
Hmm.
achievement in editing for a miniseries.
Hmm.
Now, how that works, it's actually after the first time I did it, I opted not to do it in following years because
Okay.
they lock you in a hotel room at the Beverly Hills Hotel with a video recorder, and you have episodes of each of the miniseries, and you have to watch them all the way through. You can't fast forward. You can't skip anything. You got to see the whole thing through. And there was something like 6 entries, and you had to watch all of them. So, if, for example, we were there longer than anybody, yeah, and then we had to watch the whole thing from beginning to end and all that. And then at the end, they give you a little
Mhm.
certificate that shows that you were on the voting panel for the Emmys, and they give you a free drink at the bar. Yeah.
Well, I mean that's something, right?
Yeah.
Well, what would you say would be some of the things that you paid attention to when trying to rate those movies, those MTV shows?
Well, it was for editing. So you're looking at the editing style of the show and how well it actually flows the program. And this was basically what we were looking at. Yeah. And so, we during that year I was rating, we watched things like Lonesome Dove and the hijacking of the Achille Laurel and, Roe versus Wade and these types of things. Yeah. Mm.
Okay, that's very interesting. I would really love to get more into the editing kind of things because I think I told you that I worked for the German television as an editor
Yes.
for quite a couple
Hmm.
of years.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so I have some experience with editing for television specifically.
Hmm.
But what I think is more interesting than going more into the editing, have you ever been nominated for any grading work you did? Because you have some quite big A-listing movies on your list.
Not really, because I mean, up until recently, there was never any awards given for color grading or anything like that.
Okay. When
Yeah,
did it start to appreciate awards for color grading?
quite recently, actually. There was one time where they had a thing called the Monitor Awards in Hollywood, but it wasn't very popular and people didn't really get on with it, and things like that. Yeah. Mm.
That is kind of to me that sounds weird because in
Yeah.
today's cinematography, I had the word cinematography world, um, color and grading it's a thing for itself. There are people they're very specific about it. They are very invested in it, and color is like the biggest thing today. So it's very hard for me to imagine that back in the day, people apparently did not really pay that much attention to it.
Hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, for example, it's like when I became a member of the TV Academy, there wasn't really a category for color grading. So basically, what I did is they said, okay, well, the closest we can do is put you in the editing category.
Okay.
And that was the thing, was that when I arrived at the hotel to do the voting, and somebody else saw me there in the, this is, you come into this big ballroom, and then they say, okay, you're voting on this and you're voting on this, and things like
Mhm.
that. And when somebody saw me, they said, he's not an editor, he's a colorist. Yeah. And I said, yeah, well, they have to put me where they do.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
very interesting. Would you say that color grading, when you started doing it, was considered more of a technical job? Because today it's considered as a very artistic job to do.
It was kind of half and half. Yeah. Um, doing the type of work I was doing with the interaction with directors and everything, it was more of a creative job then. Yeah. But when you're doing TV shows and things like that, then it's a more technical type thing. You're not going to be very creative when you're color grading 98 episodes of Flipper or something like that. Yeah.
Did you, I mean, you spent a whole lot of time in the vicinity of Disney Studios. Once you broke into the industry and started working professionally as a colorist, did you ever get any work from Disney color grading their movies?
Yes, I did. Absolutely. Yeah. Because Disney is a company that very much was focused on, they want to make sure that their product is secure, and they want to make sure that everything is taken care of. And they said, okay, Blake's dad used to work for the company. We can trust Blake. So we'll let Blake deal with it. And then that's why they gave me with titles like Snow White and Cinderella and in these types of titles. And so because of that, they would do this. And then also later on, um, because I was well aligned with the guys at WED Enterprises. WED Enterprises is the company, a sub company of the studio, which is the place where all the rides for the theme parks are built.
Mm-hmm.
And so before they will make a theme park, excuse me, before they would make a ride for a theme park, rather, what they would do is they would make a short film to show the people internally what the ride is going to be like.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so it was super secret. Nobody could see this or anything like that. So what they would do is they would bring it to me to put on video and to color correct it. And so we did things like, there was a ride for Disney World that was called Body Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I was working on that time for them. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Because when I first saw Pirates of the Caribbean, I did not know that it first was a ride in Disneyland,
Yeah.
and then they made this super huge film franchise out of it.
Hmm.
So that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. They've done this, for example, that was like the situation with, the Haunted Mansion as well, too. The
oh,
ride existed first and then they made a movie about it. Yeah.
oh, that's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something you wouldn't really think of that. You have a theme park with a ride, and then you make a movie out of it. I mean, you really have to get out everything you can from an IP, right?
Well, yeah, and when the thing too is, what's interesting is the um, how those rides are engineered. That's why WED Enterprises does such a tremendous job of putting everything together. For example, like when you go into the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, the house that you go into there's really nothing in there. You're actually going into a room with a giant elevator. I think it's one of the world's largest elevators.
Okay.
And the elevator takes you down. And when you're walking on that pathway, you're actually walking to a building which is next door.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
so the actual ride is in the building next door.
Hey, way to
Yeah.
hide it then.
Hmm.
Did apart from Disney then, did you do any projects for the other major studios? Because from what I understand, everything was kind of close connected back in the day.
I also did a lot of projects for 20th Century Fox,
Mhm.
and also for Universal Studios, and then of course Warner Brothers too. Yeah, and it changed because, for example, when I moved from the company I was working at in Hollywood, moved to another company in North Hollywood, and then we had an agreement there with Universal and Warner Brothers, and so we were doing all their titles over there. Yeah. So
Okay.
when I opened the grading department there, we were bang straight on. We had work from day one. Mm.
Before we go a little bit deeper into some of those works and how that translated to the stuff you do today, you mentioned that you did Cinderella and Snow
Yeah.
White for Disney. At the
Hmm.
same time, in your career, you also worked on movies like Batman and Lethal Weapon. Those are not four movies I would put in the same category.
Mm.
How would you say the work as a colorist differs on those kinds of movies, and also we're talking about the originals, so those were animated movies. How was that different to real photography?
Um, Basically, you look at the content of the film when you're going to be doing the color grading, and it's basically the same when you're working at certain movies, like Batman. They kind of gave you a certain challenge for that. And one of them is trying to conceal the cables, because this Batman with the Michael Keaton version was done before computer graphics. So what happened was that the if you didn't if you overgraded the shot, you could see the wires holding the bat plane up and stuff like this. And so you
Okay.
had to grade things down in order to conceal this. Yeah. And at one point, Warner Brothers actually made a special film copy to send to me to use for grading. And this one, because it was one generation away, it was soft enough that the cables weren't visible. Yeah. And then
Oh,
afterwards,
okay.
that once we were finished with the color grading, that copy went back to the studio and was instantly destroyed. Yeah. So it didn't
Okay.
pass into the wrong hands. Yeah.
So one more example of studios destroying evidence and movie props.
Well, the funny thing was that the film had a title on the can. It said Second Sight. And they made another film that was called Second Sight. I forget who it was who was in it. But I said, "Why did you label Batman Second Sight?" And he says, "Well, because that's not a very good movie and nobody would steal
That's a good
it."
way to keep it safe, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm looking at the animation movies.
Yeah,
I believe you told me in the past about your work on the Pink Panther.
yeah.
Um, when you look at real photography, you obviously have physical light, so the skin tones vary from scene to scene. But if you have hand-drawn animations, they have a color palette, so the color is vastly different from what a real skin tone would be, and I believe very much saturated usually. How is the work differ between those kinds of projects?
Well, the Pink Panther is kind of a unique situation because I had to color grade all of the Pink Panther cartoons.
Mhm.
And they first provided me with 16 millimeter copies of the cartoons. And I called up the studio and I said, "Well, this isn't good enough. I mean, the quality is terrible. And
Mhm.
so they turned up with the 35 millimeter original negatives for the cartoons. And I graded from that. But the thing with the Pink Panther is you have a character who's pink, and you have to have him maintain pink through the entire duration of the cartoon.
Mhm.
And if you're color grading all day long and you haven't taken a break, what will happen is your eye it drifts off color. And this can happen to anybody. Sort of, we call it color drift. And what happens is
Hmm.
that you are grading this cartoon and you think, oh, gee, this is looking great. It's perfect like this. And then you go to dinner and you come back and you go, what the heck happened there? He's not pink anymore. And you went back to the certain point in the cartoon and you could see where your eyes were getting tired. And then you'd have to change it and then bring it back and
Yes.
regrade it. And this happens a lot, especially if you're
How would you go?
that's why I always tell people, when you're color grading, take a break every 3 hours, and just go out and walk the room halls and stuff like that.
Okay, that's a very, very good advice. This is actually the very first advice that I got when I went through my apprenticeship
Yeah.
in television with the ARD. I was lucky enough that the installation where I was trained actually had a color room. It was, I think, one of two installations in Germany that had a proper color room, and they had this huge reference monitor and this huge console, and
Hmm.
it was pretty cool to work on. And they only, besides the monitor, the whole room was darkened, of course.
Mm.
Had only one light, one single light source, which was one calibrated light that was calibrated to, I think, 4006 or 200 kelvins. And then
Hmm.
would say every 20, 30 minutes, whatever time frame you need, you take a minute or two and just stare at the light, at this piece
Mm.
of wall, at this light, really recalibrate your eyes, then get back to it, frequent breaks. And
Mm.
that's, I think, the biggest learning that I took for basically all creative work that I do. It doesn't matter whether I mean, when you're editing, it's very different. It's just about the attention you can pay. And then
Mm.
you clearly see when something is off. But color, extremely subjective. Working
Yeah.
on sound, also you work on a dialogue for
Mm.
anything. Oh yeah, that's pretty well leveled. Well, then you come back and you realize, oh no, it's just way too not it's not loud enough because you've gotten used to it and your ears were oversensitive to it. So I think that is a very, very important point to take away when listening to the podcast and you're interested in color grading and these kind of things yourself, to
Yeah.
have it from a professional like you.
And this is the thing too, is that, for example, I worked at one company where, and almost all companies I worked at, we had a separate sound department. So when I would flag a movie and I would say the audio on this film needs work, then it would go there, and then they would spend the time to go through and, recondition the sound so that it would be more, more higher fidelity, basically. Yeah.
Mhm.
But we also used this department for other things because, for example, when they were working on a picture called Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan,
Mhm.
and in this film, they had, as for promotion, they had these telephone numbers that you would call up, and they would have different members of the enterprise who would give different messages on the phone when you would call in, and they had these special toll numbers. They were called 976 numbers in the US that you would call in to get this, and all this stuff had to be recorded. And I remember one day I walked down the hallway and there was the entire cast of the movie there, basically waiting to record their bit. There was Nichelle Nichols, and um, there was DeForest Kelly, and all these people were there. Yeah.
I think casual moviegoers really underestimate the amount of work that goes into those not so prominent things like color grading, sound design. I
Yeah.
mean, those are more than half of the movie, right? If
Yeah.
you have, you really don't realize you have bad sound, or you don't realize you have good sound until you heard some really bad sound in movies, I think.
Yeah. Well, this is true. Yeah. And then the other thing too was that I had a very good relation with the people at MGM Studios, because
Mhm.
when I was doing their classic films, I could recognize when there was either something wrong or something missing. And I was doing a film called Anna Karenina with Greta Garbo. And there was all of a sudden one scene, and all of a sudden the sound kept going, but the picture was missing. And I thought, oh, maybe it's the next reel. So I put the next reel up and I look at it. No, that's a later part of the picture. So I had to call the studio and found out that 20 minutes of the picture was missing. And
Okay.
so we had to take it from another copy and bring it in to try to rescue those 20 minutes that were gone.
But from what I understand, you also have a background in sound. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Or you started with working on the picture itself. I believe you worked. What did you exactly do?
I was doing sound recording when we would do like behind the scenes films of the making of a movie or something like that, and I was the audio engineer for that. Yeah.
I mean, that's really good to already have somebody who's proficient in some like different aspects of movie making. So with somebody like you,
Yeah.
focused on the color grading, and then suddenly your trained ear catches. I mean, those 20 missing minutes were probably very blatantly obvious, but also just to give feedback. Hey guys, the sound needs some work in.
Well, or like another situation was I was doing an early color movie. It was called Dr. X, and it was from 1932.
Uh-huh.
And when it was supposedly was restored, but then when I looked at it, I saw, wait a minute, the real change, the guy is inside. And then when I go 10 minutes later, he's back outside. And then it just didn't fit the whole thing. And so I called up MGM and I said, do you have anything available on Dr. X? I think the reels are swapped.
Mm-hmm.
And they found the original shooting script of the movie from 1932. Came in this big plastic crate, and they brought it in and said, here you go, And I went through, and it was interesting to see because the shooting script was on a sort of a ring binder thing, and you fold it over this way to see the different pages. And I found out that reels, because every 20-minute reel was reel 1A, reel 1B is the second half. And I found out that reel 1B and reel 1B and 2B were the wrong way around. They had been spliced incorrectly.
Did anyone else catch it? Were those ever displayed wrongly, or were you the first one to
Well,
see
it had been
and also to
displayed
correct
that
it?
way for about 6 years. Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
And nobody noticed.
Nobody noticed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what can you do? I mean,
Yeah.
things today aren't really that different. Thinking of some of the jobs that I've done, and people are not really paying that much attention to what they're actually doing. But you have been working in the industry for a very, very long time, and you've not stopped since. From what I understand, is just very recently, I believe this or last year, you just founded a new company with your brother.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And so we're doing production and post-production. We're doing documentaries and also post-production for documentaries. And so, for example, with that, we're taking care of all the color grading and editing and everything. We're doing it all ourselves. Yeah.
How did it come that you just made your own company?
Well, we said, well, between his expertise and my expertise together, we thought it makes sense to put something together to do this. And then what happened was when we have these different projects where it's involving film and things, then it's something that nobody else can deal with. And so, for example, I have a project coming up where I have to go to the US and I have to scan film and everything. So I have to take it into a cutting room, edit the whole material, and bring it into, not actually edit it there, but basically prepare it for scanning. Yeah.
So you said in the last episode your brother is a director, so that's his skill set. He brings into it, and you're more on the technical side of things and working
exactly
color graded.
Yeah.
And what I believe is that due to your background and your experience, you are exceptionally well suited doing exactly those things like film scanning. Because through the years, what I think you told me is that you've also worked with DaVinci Resolve, written the handbooks for it. So you're not only proficient with the tape side of things, That was my cat.
Mhm.
With the tape side of things, but also with all the digital workflows. So doing film scans just came very naturally then.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, for example, I'm very experienced with handling all types of film problems and different things like this, and how to manipulate the data, basically getting everything sorted. Yeah. And, and this is something that, it's nothing that you can learn in a school. It's something that you just sort of, put together in time, especially like when you're dealing with nitrate film and things like that. Nitrate film is something that you have to be careful with, and you can't transport nitrate film on an airplane because
Mm,
it's highly explosive. Well, not
yeah.
highly explosive, but it can be. Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen Inglorious Bastards. I think we know that
well,
kind of thing you can
well,
do.
the problem with nitrate film is that once it ignites, there's no way to put it out. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So once it starts burning, it burns. Yeah.
Yeah, those kinds of, I mean, the kind of experience we're talking about and all those, I mean, you connect in so many different fields, and somewhere in between there comes new things that you just happen to, well, know. It's just something that you have a good feeling about and understand things. Like you said, you can't really do that in school. And I think that today, this kind of experience is not really valued the way it maybe was back a couple of decades earlier, because I've very recently had also a situation where I was working with a company and I was doing production for them, and they had a newbie in the company. He's just
Mm,
2 years fresh out of school, basically for film,
mm,
and he had to send me some data for me to work on footage for them and also do grading and editing, and he just couldn't manage to get me the proper format because he didn't know how to upload those properly, how to also include the lists that we needed, where all the editing was noted on, and all these things. And it was just to me interesting to see that, well, if you're fresh out of school, you haven't been doing this for 10 years and experienced some of those hiccups that sometimes can occur. You don't know how to use certain online systems that are very common in the industry. And
mm.
having somebody who's lived through the golden age of film, doing everything on tape, and then also being still proficient with everything digital today, I think is unbelievably valuable.
Well, yeah, I mean, for example, it's like there's certain tricks when you're inspecting film before you're going to scan it that you do. And these things are, nobody's going to teach this to you. I mean, things like, little things like if the bobbin pops out of the middle of the reel, you don't panic, because all you have to do is just take about this much of the leader and cut it off. You can stick another bobbin in, tighten it up, and excuse me, and you're all set to go.
Yeah.
And then what happens? Another thing too is that with nitrate film, I usually will put it on a hand rewind machine, where you wind through the film by hand, and I just run my fingers on each edge of the film. And when I feel something rough going by, I know it's a splice, and then I know to stop and then inspect it and check it. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I usually go through and check things like this. And so I'll check it for damage on the edges, and then I can see what's going on. Yeah.
Those are quite, I mean, it's quite a big list of things that you're doing now. I mean, you're still doing all the movie work, you're still doing color grading.
Yeah.
Well, right now we're sitting here, we're doing a podcast.
Yes,
You
exactly.
also have a YouTube channel where you
Yes.
talk about quite many things, actually. I really enjoy watching the videos where you break down new features from DaVinci Resolve because I use that as well. What inspired you to now also start a podcast?
Well, the podcast, I wanted to have more interaction with people. I did a short podcast once with a whole group of people. We were talking about film restoration. And I was talking with different directors, a gentleman who I knew, Bill Malone, and Bill. I want I wanted to be able to, talk more with him at length. So when we were doing on film restoration, it was just a little bit for here, a little bit from here, and back and forth. And then I wanted to be able to do like more of a one-on-one type thing with people. And there are certain cinematographers who I know well and things like that. So I wanted to be able to interact more with them, to be able to, talk with them about the industry. And I thought the podcast is actually a wonderful platform for doing it. The YouTube channel, I wanted something different than, I didn't want a channel which, shows, what type of node tree you're using or what lookup tables you have or anything like that. I wanted things that focused on real life problems that you could be having and how to work with each section of Resolve properly. And focus that on individual videos. So it's easy. You say, oh, gee, I want to know how do I do a power window? You just do a search for it. Boom, you got it right there.
What would you say? What are you most passionate about at the moment of this many projects that we talked about?
Basically passionate about everything. Yeah. I don't have a favorite. I mean, I try and focus on everything possible. Yeah. That's why my days are generally very long. Yeah.
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 You just teased a couple of ideas you've had for the podcast. And anyone specific you already talked to, maybe already invited for the podcast, so we can have a little glimpse of the future of what's to.
Yeah, I want to definitely bring in William Malone, who is a director. He did The House on Haunted Hill, and he's a super great guy. And I worked with him. I've known Bill for years.
Yeah, there are so many great stories to uncover. We've privately talked about some things that we didn't even get to in the podcast. For example, you're not only working on color grading and these things today, you're also very recently selling film equipment, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. Yeah, we sell film scanners and audio mixing equipment from Fairlight and things like this. Yeah.
Basically doing it all. There's a whole lot of things that go into your day, I believe. I would really love to get into some of the specific stories that we talked about in the past privately, because there's just so much you can pack into a podcast. Those stories are really so interesting to listen to. I would, to me, this whole idea that the movie studios were so closely connected and that it was such a family business, because I have made the experience, and from talking to people who work in the industry today, that they think twice or three times about going to the movie industry, because especially as special effects artists and these kind of things, because it's become so demanding and so inhuman in some parts. And then hearing those stories where the studios were actually taking care of their employees and the families, and saying like, oh, that's Blake, we can count on him, we can make all of this work.
Well, yeah, and what was interesting is that during, growing up, I've been to all the different studios. And so what was funny was that, when I would go to 20th Century Fox as a kid, and I went to like the set of the Time Tunnel and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and these types of shows, and the studio had a much different atmosphere than other studios. Each studio had its own atmosphere, And it was funny was when we went one day, we had to go to MGM Studios. And my father, when he first started in the business, he actually started at MGM. And he was first started out as an extra in movies, and then he went into publicity. And then that was later when he migrated over to Disney. And what happened was we were there, and this was a very long time ago, because they had just finished a movie called Goodbye, Mr. Chips with Peter O'Toole. And because I remember seeing the big poster on the top. And actually, if you went into one of the sound stages, they had the Apollo space capsule and Vostok space capsule from the movie Marooned that was being shot. Apparently, they shot it there as well. And because they had these big, massive sound stages at MGM. And we went to the restaurant to have some lunch. And the cashier, said to my father, "Oh, I haven't seen you around in a while. Have you been on vacation?" And he was laughing. He says, "Yeah, last time I was there was something like 40 years ago. Like, that's one heck of a vacation." Yeah.
So how would you say the studio differed in the atmosphere?
And just overall atmosphere and it's funny about studios. It's like when I've done some work at Cinecittà in Rome.
Hmm.
And like I said to my brother, you really can't deny that's a studio because it even smells like a studio. It has
Hmm.
certain odor about it, odor of lead pencils and paper and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you, I mean, there's still so many questions I want to ask and want to talk about, but we're really pushing the limits of this podcast episode right now. Maybe as a closing
Yeah, sure.
thought, um, we talked about so many warm, nice memories of yours, experiences you made in Los Angeles, and you've worked all over the world. You've talked so brilliantly about those people and how nice they were.
Mhm.
You think that the film industry, not just Hollywood, the film industry overall today has become more cold than it was back in the day?
Mm, I don't know how it being cold, but I would say it's a lot more managed. But I think that goes with the fact of, the size. When these studios grow and grow, then they have to do this, it has to be that way. I remember I had to go to Warner Brothers to instruct the colorists there at Warner Brothers Studios. And when I went in, the security guards were extremely pleasant. They said, "Oh, you're going to be here for a week. We'll give you a pass for a whole week, so you can
Mhm.
drive your car, you park it over there, and then you're all set to go, and these types of things. It was really a pleasant experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, before any more of those questions pop up in my head, because the next thing I was thinking about was the budgets for movies, because they have exploded in the last half century. Today,
Mm.
it's absolutely normal to have a summer blockbuster costing anything between 100 and $200 million. From what I understand, movies in the 70s and 80s were made on not even a tenth of that budget, even.
Yeah, but you have to understand too that $1 million in that era was maybe $80 million by today's standards or something like
Mhm.
that. Yeah, because of
Okay, so you
economic
think just way more
situations.
for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Even accounting for inflation. Could you just do more with the money back then in the industry?
Well, yeah, you could do more, and more of it was actually done in the studio rather than on location. And people were more. I mean, for example, MGM had such an elaborate backlot area where they could shoot, and they had so many. They had a French Street, and they had all different areas. I mean, they even had a river with a river boat on it. And they had all these types of things there. And so because of that, it brought costs down tremendously. Yeah. Mhm.
Also, there was no CGI to really clog up that budget.
Well, this is it. Once CGI came in, then whoop, up went the budget. Yeah.
Okay, this is really going to be the last question for this podcast, just because it fits perfectly. The marketing machinery around these movies. Today, things are vastly different. In the past 10, let's say maybe even 15 years, companies like Netflix, the internet advancements, the availability of streaming movies has radically changed everything and anything about how movies are being distributed. Would you say that, I mean, today, if you have like $100,000 movie, you're going to put at least another 50 or 100,000 into marketing. Would you
Mm.
say the in the time of the golden era, um, maybe the machinery was a bit smaller and a bit more well made out because it was more straightforward. The movies were being distributed by the studios and these things.
Yeah, it was more, I think, in a way, it was kind of like a finely oiled machine.
Mhm.
And so what happened was they really had a very good way of, you know, producing the film, getting it out, and doing this. They had everything right down to. I mean, it was like a machine, basically. Yeah.
There were many places really to go. If you wanted to see a movie, you would go to the cinema. And from what I understand, in contrary to how today's society works, back then you would just literally go to the movies and see if anything is on. That you don't do that today anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. That was just, if you wanted to see a movie, you had to go to the movies, and that was it. Yeah.
So you would basically anyways go to the cinema, to the place where the movie is going to be played. So you're going to advertise any new movies at the cinema. I imagine there would have been a couple of magazines that you would pitch, radio shows that you would pitch, and just say, hey, here's a new movie coming out. You obviously can't trailer a movie on the radio.
Yeah, but they would do this frequently. Radio shows would plug the movies coming out, or very often. There are a lot of different avenues that they would use. And that's the reason why, for example, like my father's department was so important in this situation, because they would have different ways of, promoting films to come out. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think the whole marketing and promoting side of the industry deserves its own podcast episode, especially given your background, that you were so close to the particular field of work with your father.
Yeah.
How about we put an actual pin into this episode for now?
Okay, excellent.
Then at another time we come back to all things marketing, and because I think it's very interesting, because today you actually have to really work to get any asses in the seats in the cinema. While I think it would be really worthwhile to explore your experience of how people would go and visit the movies in the 70s and 80s, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is true. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Lovely.
Wonderful.
Then, I'm very much looking forward to it. Next couple of episodes I will not be hosting, but I will be listening very closely, because you're going to invite some very interesting guests, and I'm very excited and very keen on it.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thanks so much. Yeah.
All right, then.
Great.
Blake, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure, like always.
Okay. Thank you so much for hosting. It was wonderful. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we'll talk soon.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Great.